coverage leading into the pandemic. And it's time now for my political panel. And this afternoon, it's Liberal MP Tim Wilson and Labor MP Dr Anne Ali. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thanks for having us.
I want to start on this issue around Christian Porter and this blind trust that clearly partly paid for his legal fees in his defamation case. Tim, should he disclose who is behind the significant legal fees in this defamation case?
What I think should occur is we should have consistent rules on these things because we don't actually have consistent rules. Currently there's a process of declaration which the Attorney-General has done consistent with his obligations, but we're applying one standard to Christian Porter that doesn't apply to other people. I'll give you an example. If you go to Anne Ali's Register of Interest, she only disclosed she has a superannuation fund. She doesn't disclose whether it's a self-managed superannuation fund, its name, what's inside the superannuation fund, exactly the same way that we're expecting of Christian Porter.
OK, I'll ask Anne Ali about that any moment, but I want to ask you, you didn't answer my question. You're talking about consistency. I want to know from you whether you think he should just tell us who stumped up the money.
Well, as far as I'm aware, firstly, I've only read the press reports. I haven't spoken to him about it, but it isn't totally clear to me that he knows who the case is, and I don't also know whether it's a common fund, as in it's not one that's just accessible to him. But he has met the rules and the standards and consistent with Parliamentary declaration, so it's his choice.
That's a terrible standard, isn't it? That's
no, that's why
weird.
I said I want a consistent stand. That's currently
a consistently
the standard
terrible
rules.
Standard. That's terrible. And this
I know. Look at Anne Ali's interests.
Do you really? Come on, mate. No. This is. He's not told us who's behind paying for the legal fees. Come on, Tim Wilson. I know that the Prime Minister, according to the Australian Financial Review, has spoken to him about it. He's considering now, this is Christian Porter, what he might do. Do you think he should just tell us if he knows, or if he doesn't, return the money?
Well, I mean, if he knows, that's obviously a choice for him. But I just want to be crystal clear that there's an established standard in the parliamentary declarations, which is you're obliged to disclose trust. And I use the example of where Anne hasn't even done it herself, so I won't take any self-righteous statements from her. But when it comes to Mr Porter, if he knows the details of it, then it's ultimately his decision, and he's got to make a decision about whether it's the moral responsibility.
And what do you think? Does he have a moral responsibility to do it?
My personal view is that people should disclose this information, as I have, under my register of interests.
OK, so he does have, just to clarify, you believe Christian Porter...
What I say is I live by the standards that I set, and I believe that people should live up to the standards. They're the standards that I set, and I expect other people to follow them.
But you think there is a moral duty?
What we have is... I believe that I have that moral duty, but the standards and the rules show otherwise.
You shouldn't just have it. It should be for everyone in the parliament, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Let's have a consistent standard. That's where I started. OK. Anne Ali, he talked about your own superannuation.
Let me add him, Patricia, because it is farcical. It is farcical for Tim to mention superannuation funds here. We are not talking about disclosing superannuation funds here. We're not talking about superannuation funds. We are talking about a gift to Christian Porter for his own personal legal battles. That is what we're talking about here. That is what that blind trust is. It is a completely different set of rules. No member of Parliament has ever done this before. And let me remind Tim and your viewers out there that this is the man who, as Shadow Attorney General, made it mandatory for unions to disclose who their donors were. Now, if Christian Porter doesn't know who donated the money, he shouldn't accept the money. Who donated it? We don't know. It could be a foreign power trying to influence him. It could be Clive Palmer seeking, a favour for Christian Porter siding against the West Australian people with him. We don't know where this money is coming from. And if Christian Porter doesn't know, he shouldn't be accepting the money. And it is not like superannuation, Tim. Don't even try to draw that bow.
OK, so...
No, it's not.
I'm sorry, this is a massive double standard where you don't have to disclose things, but others do. Now, whether or not I agree with whether disclosure should be happen, apply the same standards to your own circumstances, and don't give me the self-righteous indignation when you're not prepared to apply exactly the same standard to yourself.
So going to the substantive issue, though, Tim Wilson, It could be, that point that Anne Ali made is actually quite relevant here. It could be a foreign interest trying to influence. It could be. I'm not saying it is. There's no evidence. I've got nothing.
Well, that would be illegal, and I would have thought, actually.
But, yeah.
And if that's the case, then that's an issue that needs to be investigated.
So anything,
but no one has any evidence of that. It's just an allegation.
I think that's the issue, though, right? If we don't know who stumped the money, could be anyone. Could be dodgy figures. It could be very non-dodgy people, just people who want to help out.
But this is. I accept the point you're making, but it's also entirely speculative. If people have evidence to make these claims, there are often trusts which donate to supports and causes
and this is the issue,
across
though.
the board,
the fact
and they're
that
often
we are
involved with lots of people
is
who
the problem, isn't it, for Christian Porter? The fact that we are on national television engaging in speculation is because it's not disclosed. This is actually at the heart of the problem.
Exactly the same principle I'm applying to Anne Ali's register of interest, where she won't disclose the details of her superannuation fund, even though she's obliged to.
This is not like a superannuation fund, Tim. It is a blind trust.
You keep saying that, but I'm sorry, this is about disclosure, as you
rightly make out. Stop trying to make it like that.
Okay.
Well, we're talking about superannuation as income, and you can't have one standard that you apply to you and not as a different standard you apply to
This is not
others.
income. It's a gift for him to fight his legal battle.
It isn't
his
income, it is a
legal
gift.
battle.
Although maybe there is an argument for disclosing superannuation too. That's a separate one, but perhaps...
There is.
Yeah. But
in the last time in Parliament, another member of Parliament took a whack at me, even though he didn't even disclose that he had a superannuation fund, and I disclosed the full details of mine. Again, double standards on the part of Labor.
But you're making a different argument, right? You're doing that thing that we learn in debating. I went to debating too, where you kind of change the argument. You're not dealing with the substantive argument. You say that this is all just
what the rules
same.
say, and that's what he's done.
But it's called muddying the water. I'm asking you a specific thing. He was the former Attorney General. He got bankrolled to deal with this defamation case, and we don't know who paid for it. We should.
Right, well,
And
again...
he doesn't know. He doesn't want to know.
What were you saying, Tim?
I was saying it's outlined that the trust has contributed to that. Now, it's up to Mr Porter to decide whether he thinks it's an appropriate course of action to disclose that if he has that further information. But the standard we're applying is a double standard because we're not applying the same standard to Anne Ali and other people who take a different view.
Anne Ali,
say as I do, but not as I want.
OK, I do think it's a muddying of the water, but still, do you think you should disclose? Do you think it's a big deal? I don't know. I don't know if you would care, but would you disclose?
I'm happy to disclose my superannuation. That's not the issue here because this is not like a superannuation fund. This is... This blind trust was not set up as a superannuation fund for Christian Porter. It was set up specifically to fund his legal battle. And again, Christian Porter made it illegal.
You know that?
Yeah, well, that's what he said. He's made it so that unions have to disclose the source of their donation.
Yeah, and that's a double standard too, isn't it?
Exactly. One rule for everyone else. You want to talk about double standards, Tim? One rule for everyone else and one for Christian Porter. We had a Banking Royal Commission that revealed that banks were dealing in counter-terrorism and money laundering because they did not know the source of where that money was coming from. Yeah, and I'm not drawing any inferences there at all, please, Patricia. But it is important to know. If I was suddenly gifted $1 million, I'd want to know where it came from, wouldn't you?
I would be shocked if anyone gifted me $1 million.
I would too.
I would probably pass out from shock and die if someone ever gave me $1 million. And that's how shocking
I don't even know what $1 million looks like.
So,
but yeah.
Right? But Tim Wilson, that point, the fact that I would die of shock, and I genuinely would, is because...
I'd probably die of shock too, don't worry.
Because it's so unlikely that someone would give me $1 million for anything, right? I don't have anyone who wants to back me in that way, sadly. Maybe I haven't impressed anyone enough. And that's, again, the substantive issue, is it not, Tim Wilson, that anyone who wanted to enthusiastically help him like this, you want to know what their motives are. And that's why we're interested, right?
I'm sure that's why you're interested. I mean, there are plenty of reasons why people want to know.
Yeah, it's called accountability.
Well, there are plenty of reasons why people might want to, support Mr Porter in his criticisms of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. He doesn't, like most of us, have the same luxury where if an ABC journo makes allegations against people, then their full costs are covered by the Australian taxpayer out of their own legal fund because the cost is dispersed across every taxpayer. So there are plenty of people who would have legitimate reasons to want to criticise the ABC and support people who do criticise the ABC or come under the attack of the ABC.
All right, we're going to park this because we could talk about it forever, and there's another issue we do have to talk about. Victoria will outline its roadmap this weekend. Sick of the term roadmap, but I'm still just used it. Tim, what do you want to see in it? We're about to reach that 70% one-dose trigger tomorrow, it seems.
What I want to see is kids getting back to school. I want a pathway where it's clear about when people can start to socialise again, even if it's just outdoors, because the human connection of those people who are living alone and have had very little other human interaction, and you know this experience, as many people do, Patricia, is real. And of course, I think what small businesses want to see is a pathway back where they can open, because while small businesses have been shut, Australian consumers have been shuffled into large businesses, and of course they're doing well and hunky-dory, and you can see this in the profits and returns that they're reporting this financial season, while small businesses are being trashed. And so I think what we want is clarity about what's going to be able to be done at what time frame, and of course a critical part of that is when Victoria is also going to have open borders with other states.
And we've talked before about this, but the national roadmap talks about that 70 and then that 80% vaccination rate to open the country. Do you think WA should open up to the rest of the country? I know some very heartbroken people from WA who live in other parts of the country who just feel like they're staring, including my executive producer on my Drive program, who are staring down the barrel of just not seeing their families. It feels like forever.
Yeah, well, I'm in that situation too, with one son in Sydney and one in Melbourne.
It's awful, right? Should that shift when you've got a lot of people protected?
Well, let's remember, first of all, that the Doherty modelling is based on a national average. So it's not about one state getting to 70 or 80%. It's about the national average of Australia getting to 70 or 80%. And the fact is, we would have got there much faster had the Prime Minister picked up the phone and secured those Pfizer vaccines when Pfizer rang and offered them to Australia. So we can't ignore that. We can't ignore the fact that the vaccine uptake and the vaccine rate has been slow because of a lack of vaccine supplies. But you know, I think once that WA does get to that critical level of double vaccinations, yeah, we should be opening up. There is no reason after that why we shouldn't be at least forging a way back to some form of normality. And I know it's hard to say coming from WA because, you know, our caves here are beautiful and we are allowed out, and it's relatively been life as normal for most of the time during these last 2 years. And, you know, we look at New South Wales and we look at Victoria, and, you know, for people like me who have family members in those two states, but for others it's difficult, to others in Western Australia, it's difficult to know the impact that these lockdowns have had.
Tim, Victorian police have just announced this afternoon they're going to shut down the public transport network between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. on Saturday to try and stop an anti-lockdown protest or reduce it. Are you comfortable with that measure?
There are a lot of measures I haven't been comfortable with throughout this entire period, Patricia. That won't surprise you. I've said that consistently, and it worries me greatly that if you're an essential worker and you need to get to work, that obviously creates complications and difficulties. But there's no point pretending otherwise. There are lots of measures that I suspect a lot of us haven't been very comfortable with. I think people should obey the law. Let me be clear about that. But it seems increasingly that the police are having to take more extreme measures. And this is one of the fundamental problems of the unsustainability of lockdowns. And I've said this consistently, is they can work for short, sharp purposes. I'm not arguing that. And particularly if you are very early in the stage and you want to get case loads down to zero. But you can't just expect to lock people up in their homes continuously, and at some point people just keep going along with it. And I think this is now what's sadly being shown in the transmission numbers. If you look at New South Wales and Victoria, the number of transmissions has broadly bubbled along, and then of course they've started to steadily rise. And one of the reasons is because people at some point can't sustain the measures. We're sociable people and there are consequences to doing so.
Look, just in some breaking news, it's been reported by news.com.au's Samantha Maiden. The Prime Minister has sought advice on whether the blind trust arrangement conforms to the ministerial standards. So that happened after that big debate we had. Just quick answer from both of you. Anne Ali, are you pleased to hear that he's done that?
Yes, absolutely. I hope he follows up with some real action and that, you know, Christian Porter gets to follow the rules that everyone else has to follow.
And how about you, Tim? I mean, you're making, you know, an argument about the superannuation, but are you glad to hear that the Prime Minister sought this advice?
Yeah, I'm quite relaxed about it. But again, I'd like other people to follow the same standard they're setting for themselves, including Anne.
OK, we're out of time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Patricia.
Liberal MP Tim Wilson and Labor MP Anne Ali there. Before we go,